Hey guys, so this video is about sugar and what sugar does to our body, what are bad impacts of sugar and glucose on our body, and I have seen radical differences in my energy level and overall improvement in my mental health because of quitting sugar or reducing sugar to 3% or maybe reducing the sugar by 97%, cutting down the sugar. So let's talk about it. There's a lot to cover in this particular video. uh, I have been reading this book, Glucose Revolution, by Jessie Inchauspé, and she has a very nice writing style where she breaks down all these concepts to a very basic level. So I'm gonna cover some interesting tidbits and some important facts about glucose and why it's important for us to reduce the glucose spikes. So let's talk about some interesting thing, which is about history. That there was a Dutch a Belgian scientist called Jan Helmont, and he discovered partly in 1640 that plants don't eat soil to grow, and it was a very interesting experiment that he did, and I really like that experiment because whatever small means and tools that he had, he tried to kind of make sure that he uses them to understand if plants are really using soil to grow and have new leaves and new branches, or they only use something else. So he figured out that they don't use soil, they use a little bit of water, they use something from the air, and they use direct sunlight to make new leaves. And that was the beginning of this concept or idea of photosynthesis. Although photosynthesis were discovered pretty later, I think in 1960s or something. Now let's go to the basics of glucose. The reason why we eat glucose, or the primary purpose of biological purpose of glucose, is to be turned into energy, and the powerhouse that really makes it possible is mitochondria, which is available in every cell. Glucose is found in different forms in plants. So if you look at plant or tree, any organic matter in that sense, it's all made of glucose, the different forms of glucose. For example, roots are starch. Fiber is also a kind of glucose, but it's just a different chemical composition of glucose. And fructose, which is found in like fruits and berries and all, and not berries. Berries has pretty less sugar, but let's go about that later. But fructose is 2.3 times more sweeter than glucose, and sucrose, which also gets broken into fructose and glucose. And this sucrose is something which is also kind of made out of sugar cane, and it is the table sugar that we really have, and it's found in fruit and nuts. Any plant that we are eating, it has some sort of kind of sugar. Some sugar is something which is found in form of fiber, which is great, which is complex carb, and some form of sugar, some form of glucose is something which is kind of detrimental to our health. Now another fact, fructose, which gets broken into fructose and glucose. It gets broken into intestine, and the interesting thing about fructose is that it can only be stored as a fat cell. So we can't store it in form of muscle, we can't store anywhere else. We can't convert it into energy as well. And fiber is never broken into glucose because we don't have any enzyme to break it, and that's why fiber plays a very important role for our gut health. Anything which is starchy product, or sucrose or glucose, is all also called carb. Simple carbs and complex carbs, that concept. Now another interesting information is that our liver can make glucose out of fat and protein through a process called gluconeogenesis. So why does this concept is important is because we don't need to give our body external sugar or external glucose. Our body can make sugar from fat and protein, and there are a lot of other benefits as well when this process really happens, because in this process ketones also get released, which is a better fuel and things like that. You might if you go through the literature of ketosis, you will understand it. So yeah, our liver is self-sufficient to make glucose out of protein and fat, so reduce sugar as much as you can. Now there is another interesting information that you know a fiber is taken away from food, and glucose and starch is added to food so it can be preserved for a longer time. So that's why you see a lot of times when you buy a packet of veggies like greeny leafy things, and you put it in the freezer, and you when you take out of the freezer, it loses it gets a lot of moisture, it loses that crispiness. And the reason why it happens is because it has got a lot of fiber. And when you look at some of the other products, you can freeze it for a longer time, you can take out, and they will look almost same. And the reason why they look actually same is because a lot of fiber has been taken out from that food. Now another interesting fact which I really like to kind of know about these interesting information, that in each of us, our human body is made up of 30 trillion cells, and every time we spike it, every time glucose gets spiked in our body, every cell in our human body feels it, and the mitochondria gets stressed, or mitochondria converts that glucose, that and that sugar into energy. Now the main idea behind glucose revolution, and the main idea behind this book is to and the main goal should be to reduce the glucose spike, and making sure that this variability in the glucose level in our body is reduced. And this variability, which is caused by spikes, is the most problematic thing. Flattening glucose curve is also called kind of reducing glycemic variability. So if you reduce the glycemic variability, your body will function in a more more in tune with whatever your energy levels are and whatever your metabolic needs are. Now another interesting factor is that CGMs, the continuous glucose monitors, they can't detect fructose. Just another interesting bit there. Sweet spikes is more harmful than starchy spikes. So if you have to make a choice between eating something which is starchy versus something which is sweet, choose the starchy option. And now let's talk about it, that what really happens when glucose enters our bloodstream, and when it really goes to our cell. So too much glucose, if you give like a little bit of glucose to mitochondria, it will convert into energy, and you will feel energetic, you will do a lot of things, and you will consume that. But if you give too much of glucose to mitochondria just gives up, and cells end up producing free radicals, and these free radicals cause DNA damage, and they also poke holes in the cell membrane. And there's too many free radicals in the body, they cause oxidative stress, and oxidative stress causes cardiovascular problems, type 2 diabetes, cognitive decline, general aging. And this there's another factor, that too much of fat, if you give the body, that also causes oxidative stress. So oxidative stress is pretty harmful for our kind of body, and you need to take antioxidants to kind of reduce that oxidative stress in the body. And what else is happening when glucose enters the body? There is something which is called glycation. So glycation is the process through which glucose molecules replace protein linkages, and they cause impairment in normal cellular and tissue functions. And during glycation, glucose attached to fat and protein cells, and they form a byproduct called H, which is advanced glycation end product. And this results into wrinkles. This process causes oxidative stress. So to sum it up, there is free radical which is being released because mitochondria is not able to process all these glucose, and glycation is happening, and because of this glycation there is impairment in tissue, and cellular process happens. And because of too much of free radical, this causes an oxidative stress in the body, and this whole, all of this confluence of these three things, they leads to generalized state of inflammation. Inflammation, if you look at it as a response, body response, it is not harmful, it is a productive measure. But if you are into chronic inflammation, then it is harmful. And from outside, it's only redness or swelling in this swelling in the skin, but from inside, all these tissues and cells are being damaged. Let's talk about fructose a little bit. Fructose, because fructose is very important one, and fructose is found in fruits, and everyone loves fruits, and it's very hard to keep away from fruits. And fruit also comes with a lot of fiber, so there is a lot of benefit to it. And but it's very important to understand what really fructose does to our body, so we make some good choices and decisions, and we try to reduce the impact of fructose on our body. Fructose can only be stored as a fat, and what really happens when fructose enters into our body, it goes into stomach, it goes to intestine, and it goes to liver. And first it impacts liver, it turns liver into fatty liver. So grade 1 fatty liver is something which a lot of people have when they eat a lot of fatty products, and if they also eat a lot of fruit. And fat gets stored in the first liver, and then it gets stored in face and thighs and hips, and that's why you see a lot of fat there in those body parts. And finally, it enters into bloodstream, and that's the place where it contributes to increased risk of cardiovascular disease, and also increase LDL, which is low density lipoprotein, or it's also called bad cholesterol. So you can see how glucose and kind of fructose and general level of if you increase glucose and fructose both, and your mitochondria already has the enough glucose, then this fructose cannot be consumed, and fructose has to be stored in fat cells, and it will go into bloodstream, and it will start creating problems by increasing LDL, and it will start creating cardiovascular problems. Now, let's talk about what happens to our body when because of glucose spikes. Glucose spikes cause a lot of problems. Number one problem is that it overall decreases our immunity. Short-term effects are that constant hunger, people crave, they got like food cravings, they have got a lot of people I have seen, they are always in chronic fatigue, poor sleep, memory decline, cognitive decline, migraine, and type 1 diabetes, which is the state when body can't produce insulin. And then long-term effects are acne and other skin problems, aging, arthritis, cancer risk, depressive episodes, gut issue, heart issue, fatty livers, wrinkles, and type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is very common, which is the state when I think type 2 diabetes is not very common, but it is a state when your body develops insulin resistance. So yeah, I think that's pretty much about glucose revolution so far. And I'm also going to read this book and try to find out some of the hacks that Jessie is talking about. But one of the hack that she talks about is that if you really have to eat carb, make sure that you eat fiber first, and then fat and protein, and then sweet and desserts and stuff like that. And this is how you can reduce the glycemic variability. This is how you can reduce the bad impact of glucose. So that's one hack. And yeah, I mean, just add some green products as well. That's the kind of a second hack. And third hack that she talks about is that whenever you have had your food, make sure that you kind of make some movement. So when you make some movement, you essentially consume that energy and that you have created, and it helps in kind of having a steady glucose levels. And pick a snack rather than a kind of sweet product, and reach for vinegar before you eat. And after you eat, you move. If you have to snack, then go for savory. And then just add some green starter to your meal. So that's pretty much about glucose revolution and what I have been kind of studying. And I can't speak more about the value of reducing the glucose spikes, but It's not a very easy one. Everyone has got their food choices and their food cravings and stuff like that. Yeah, that's pretty much.